What would you do if the person who was supposed to love you tried to tear you down with cruel words? Cheated on you? And then lied about it? In today's story, the protagonist's response is a 2-decade-long masterclass in how to not only survive but deliver a reckoning so complete. It's almost poetic. It all started back in the 90s when I was in college. Through some mutual friends, I met Leo, who was 23 at the time. He had just graduated and was getting ready to move 3,000 miles to the opposite side of the country for grad school. In a twist that felt like fate, I was already planning a move with my friends to a city just a 90-minute drive from his new university. We fell for each other hard and fast, convinced the universe had brought us together. I even became close with his family. His 2 sisters and younger brother were wonderful people, and we became instant friends. He was an animal sciences PhD student, and since I was working full-time, it was easier for me to drive to him on the weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. Money was tight, so our dates were usually cheap tacos. And we spent most of our time at his house where he was breeding and selling small animals to make extra cash. Being around animals was his life, and I loved it. I even struck up a friendship with Eleanor, the wife of his PhD advisor. She worked in administration at the university, and we'd often have lunch together when I visited. I was a social person and ended up making friends in his program even faster than he did. We had been dating for about 2 years when things took a turn. We were at his house, lying in bed together, when he turned to me out of the blue. He said he was concerned I'd been gaining weight and it was making it harder for him to be attracted to me. There was no mention of my health, only his attraction. I had gained maybe 10 pounds in 2 years and still wore the same size 6 or 8 clothes. I sat up and, refusing to take that kind of nonsense, said, "Well, then maybe you should make sure there is better food for me to eat than crackers and cheese when I come up on weekends." I wasn't going to fight about it. This was his problem, not mine. I calmly asked him, "So what is your solution to this?" He stared at me, completely blank, and mumbled, "Well, I guess that you should try to lose weight." "Nah," I said. "I'm not going to do that." "So what are you going to do about it?" "Well, I guess nothing," he replied. "I just wanted to let you know how I feel." Leo thought he was being clever, planting a seed of insecurity he hoped would make me do his dirty work for him. He was completely unaware that this cowardly act would be the first domino to fall, leading directly to his own ruin. I just said, "Cool. Thank you." Put my clothes back on, and went to sleep. Driving home the next morning as usual, we continued dating. But about 3 months later, he called to break up with me after nearly 3 years together. The reason he gave me, and I quote, was, "You don't know enough about science." He claimed he couldn't have a real conversation with me about his work without having to use common animal names instead of their scientific ones. I knew it was garbage and told him so, demanding the real reason. But he stuck to his story. A month later, he came by to drop off something of mine, and I confronted him again. He finally broke, admitting he had been seeing one of his undergraduate students, a 19-year-old named Chloe. He was 26 and her teacher. I screamed at him to get out, and my roommate threatened to physically throw him off our second-floor balcony if he didn't leave. After he was gone, the full weight of it hit me, and my rage dissolved into stunned, disbelieving laughter. I'd met Chloe a few times. I remembered a barbecue at his house where she'd spilled something on her pants. And Leo had asked me to lend her some of my sweatpants. I couldn't. I was a size 8. And she was a size 18. And in that moment of clarity, it all clicked into place. He obviously liked bigger women. The comments about my weight weren't about me at all. They were a pathetic, cowardly attempt to make me break up with him so he wouldn't have to be the bad guy. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, that holding on to this for 20 years is unhinged. But this wasn't about obsession. It was about seeing a fundamentally flawed person face the consequences he had dodged for decades. My next moves weren't about petty revenge. They were about justice. I emailed his roommates. The standard way to communicate in the early 2000s if you didn't want to talk on the phone. I told them we'd broken up and thanked them for being such great friends to me. They replied, admitting they knew about Chloe and had been the ones who demanded Leo tell me the truth. Or they would. That's what prompted his lame science excuse. One of the roommates, a really sweet guy named Ryan, offered to help me retrieve the last of my things from their house. He suggested I come up for the weekend so we could go out, have some drinks, and do all the fun things Leo always claimed he didn't want to waste money on. I said yes. I drove up that weekend. And Ryan let me into the house while Leo was out. My plan was already forming. I walked through the house and took detailed photographs of all of his animals. I might not have been a PhD student, but I had paid attention. I knew for a fact that he was keeping an endangered species, an unreleasable animal he'd gotten from a rescue. There was simple paperwork and a $25 fee required to keep it legally. But he had refused to file it, saying he didn't want the government in his business. This reveals Leo's greatest fatal flaw, his arrogant belief that rules were for other people. It was this short-sightedness, this refusal to handle even the smallest responsibilities, that would ultimately cost him everything. I took photos of that animal, the overcrowded breeding conditions, and another animal that was completely illegal to own in the state, which was sitting in a tank right next to a window, visible from outside. That night, Ryan and I went out for a night on the town. We made a point to stumble back to the house around midnight, ensuring Leo and Chloe, who were watching TV on the couch, would see us. I was in a short dress, happily drunk, with Ryan practically carrying me. I spent the night in Ryan's room. He was a perfect gentleman, but we put on a show. He made sure to parade past the living room in his boxers a few times, and we giggled and moaned just loud enough for them to hear. Some people might think revenge is just about kicking over garbage cans, but I knew true vindication required something more substantial than a one-night performance. The next morning, as I was leaving, I made a point to slowly eat a donut in my rumpled dress and messy hair while Ryan beamed at me and planted a kiss on my head. Leo sneered, "You don't have to act like a whore in front of me." Chloe just looked ashamed, staring at the floor. I looked him right in the eye and said, "Have fun with my leftovers," before walking out the door. That petty scene was just the appetizer. My real revenge was just getting started. The very next day, I had my photos developed, the good old days, and made a call to the State Office of Fish and Wildlife. I reported the potential overcrowding of his breeding animals and the 2 species he was harboring illegally. And I asked them how to make a formal report. It turned out I was far more liked in his program than he was. Ryan and the other roommate were sick of Leo's entitled behavior and offered to submit official complaints to the university. stating that a TA was sleeping with his own student and showing her favoritism. The night we were out, we made sure to tell the story to everyone we knew in their program. Soon, the entire department knew he had cheated on me and was now dating his 19-year-old student. With my official statement and photos sent to the state, my next call was to my friend Eleanor, the wife of Leo's PhD advisor. She already knew about the breakup and his ridiculous excuse. I told her the truth, he had admitted, in writing, to sleeping with his student. I forwarded her the emails. To say she was furious would be an understatement. While I was still on the phone with her, she told me she would ensure it was investigated and immediately told her husband, Leo's direct advisor, what was happening. A few weeks later, I got a giddy phone call from Ryan. State fish and wildlife officials were at the house, confiscating animals. Ryan told them he'd be happy to cooperate fully. Chloe was there and, in a panic, told the officers that as far as she knew, all the animals belonged to her boyfriend Leo and were perfectly legal. That statement put Ryan and the other roommate completely in the clear. One of the illegal animals was kept in the backyard, so the officials implied to Leo that a neighbor had been the one to report it. Because I had tipped them off, they knew to look through the back window to see the second, far more illegal animal inside. Since Ryan was on the lease, he let them in to search the common areas of the house. After a few hours, they returned with a warrant to take all the animals and search Leo's private room. Chloe apparently couldn't reach Leo. This was before cell phones were everywhere, and eventually drove to the university to find him. They left nothing but a tank of guppies. Now, here's where it gets serious. PhD students rely on grant money for their research, and a huge chunk of that funding comes from the federal government. Just before our breakup, Leo had secured a major grant from the EPA. My next phone call was to them. I simply asked how one would report a federal grant recipient who was currently under state investigation for illegally harboring endangered animals. The fallout was catastrophic for him. He lost the EPA grant and was forced to pay back the nearly $30,000 he had already used. He would never be eligible for another federal grant. On the state charges, he avoided jail time because the animals were healthy, but he was fined $15,000 and lost all his breeding animals, which were worth thousands. The 2 illegal animals were sent to a nearby nature center. And for years, whenever I was in the area, I would stop by to visit them. The university, upon investigating the student complaints, revoked his scholarship and fired him from his TA position for having an inappropriate relationship with a student. He somehow avoided full expulsion, but it always baffled me that he was so arrogant he couldn't even wait 4 weeks for her class to end before making their relationship public, which would have put him in the clear according to university rules. After a few months passed, I reached out to his sisters, telling them I missed them but felt awkward after Leo broke up with me for cheating on me after calling me fat. They were shocked. He had told his entire family that I had broken up with him because of the distance. I forwarded them the emails where Leo waxed poetic about falling for Chloe and how he was sorry. But it was for the best since I couldn't keep up with him academically. His dad ended up paying for 1 more year of school so Leo could at least get a master's degree instead of his PhD. I went on with my life, got a master's degree myself, and found my specialty, helping scientists and doctors communicate their complex work to lay people. The irony wasn't lost on me. Fast forward about 20 years. I'd heard through his siblings that Leo and Chloe got married, had 2 kids, and that he had gone back to simply breeding animals. I was at a major university, giving a lecture to a room of 250 students. Afterwards, while I was mingling, a voice said, "Hey, long time no see." It was Leo. I felt a jolt of shock, but my face remained a perfect, pleasant mask. My instinct was to play dumb. "I'm so sorry. Help me out," I said, tilting my head. "Have we met at another lecture?" He looked stunned. "It's me, Leo," he said. "I just can't place you," I replied, feigning deep thought. "Finally," I gasped with mock realization. "Oh my goodness. Leo. Wow. I guess I blocked you out. Lovely to see you." I then quickly moved on as he tried to give me a hug. I was satisfied just leaving it at that, the quiet victory of him seeing me as a respected guest lecturer while he was just a face in the crowd. But the universe wasn't done. That evening, the department faculty who had invited me took me to dinner. One of them asked, "So, you know Leo?" I did. "Over 20 years ago," I said vaguely. She then told me he had just interviewed for a teaching position there and that they were likely going to hire him. And there it was. The final, quiet nudge. He had built a new life on a foundation of lies and omissions, never imagining that the past he buried could be unearthed so easily by a simple, truthful statement over dinner. I couldn't help it. I scoffed. When they all looked at me, I said, "I'm sorry. I'm just shocked he's teaching after what happened at University X. He was sleeping with a 19-year-old student when he was 26 and had to leave the program without his PhD because he lost his scholarship." The mood at the table shifted instantly. The three faculty members exchanged a look that screamed, "We have a problem," and quickly changed the subject. A few days ago, my old friend Eleanor called me. She said a colleague at that university had called her to do a background check on Leo. They had pulled his old file, which contained the complaint letters, the documentation of his firing, his failure to complete the PhD, and, as a bonus, a copy of his arrest record for the illegal animals, which his father's lawyer had gotten expunged from standard checks. I don't think he's going to get that job. The best revenge is when you don't have to do anything wrong. You just have to help direct the truth to the right places. If someone who is supposed to love you ever complains about your looks, remember that it is their flaw, not yours. If Leo hadn't been a coward, I might never have found out about Chloe and simply turned his own wickedness back on himself. So what do you think? Was this a 20-year-long act of calculated revenge? Or was it simply a case of karma, with a little nudge, finally catching up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.